7 o'clock here in New York City. Meanwhile, a Fox News alert inside the lives of a killer couple in California. Their murderous rampage, as you know, left 14 dead. But did they have a bigger plan in mind? What the investigation is now revealing. Will Carr is live in San Bernardino with the chilling new details. Will.
Good morning, guys. It really appears that these suspects were ready for war when you think about the armory that they had in their house. Now, investigators are trying to figure out exactly what led up to this, so they're taking a hard look at the overseas trips that Farouk took. We know that he went to Saudi Arabia twice in the past 2 years. The FBI also says that at some point he went to Pakistan. Both Farouk and his wife Malik returned to the United States in July of 2014, and government officials now say that he was in contact with a small number of extremists and may have been radicalized. They're also talking to his family. His brother is a decorated Navy veteran. Now, when you think about the firepower, that you think that they were ready to do battle. They had 4 guns on them during the shootings. Those were legally purchased. Farouk bought the handguns. Authorities say they're now searching for the person who bought the AR-15s that Farouk and Malik used to fire 76 rounds at officers. They also had 1,400 rounds in their black SUV. We're also learning about their home in the Redlands, just a few miles from here. It's being called an IED factory. They had 12 pipe bombs, 2,000 9mm rounds, 2,500 assault rifle rounds, and investigators tell us they do believe that they had a second target in mind. Now, for the first time, we're also hearing from first responders. Lieutenant Mike Madden was one of the first inside of the Inland Regional Center and says the carnage was something he never could have imagined.
You know, I did the job that I was supposed to do. My job is to go in there and, you know, people don't call the police because they're having a great day. They call because there's tragedy going on. And this was tragedy that I've never experienced in my career and that I don't think most officers do.
The community really praising the police response here, as well as thinking about the stories of survival. There's Kevin Ortiz, who was actually shot 5 times. 1 round went into his chest, but it was deflected by a cell phone that he had in his jacket, and it's believed that may have saved his life. There are a number of stories of the heroic actions, not only by first responders, but also by people inside of that building rushing to the aid of those who had been shot. This community really trying to concentrate on those stories instead of the killers and the carnage they left behind. Guys.
All right, Will Carr live on the West Coast. Thank you very much, Will.
Thank you, Will. We're going to bring in former White House National Security Council staff member Jillian Turner now. Jillian, as more information comes in about these killers, you know, the amount of ammo they had, what their plan could have been further if they actually did execute what they were going to intend to do. You know, we're looking now at their ties to Pakistan. What role did it play? We understand that his wife was from Pakistan. He traveled on a passport from Pakistan. Draw the connection and connect the dots for our viewers at home.
Sure. Yeah, radical Islam is a major problem in Pakistan. The face of it has changed over the past decade. You know, there was the Taliban, we had Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS poses the largest domestic threat there. Pakistan's chief of the army acknowledged that publicly the other day. So something that's they're really battling as well.
So the countries we've heard recently when thinking of domestic terror, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, there was original speculation about Al-Qaeda's connection there. But now we hear Pakistan, and we hear direct connection to Pakistan, the country that harbored Osama bin Laden. Yeah. Could this have very serious national security implications at this point?
Absolutely. You know, because of that, because Osama bin Laden found refuge inside that country undetected, allegedly, by Pakistan's security forces for so long, relations with the Obama administration have been very strained. It's no secret that during the raid in which he was killed, we didn't inform the Pakistanis in advance, so there's been an ongoing feud and remaining tensions since then.
There's some suggestion that she may have actually been his terror trainer, that he could have radicalized her. You know, when you look right now in this country, there's a big debate about all these Syrian refugees, you know, and we hear from the administration, well, they're going to be vetted. We don't have to worry about it. When you look at her, she applied for a K-1 visa in Pakistan. And under the laws of the land, she should probably not have been granted that, because there was a real good possibility she was going to overstay the visa because she was going to go with this guy. You know, and I know, they shouldn't have given her a visa.
Absolutely not. And, you know, for whatever reason, they didn't stake out those warning signs in advance. But Pakistan, I want to point out, is also a huge challenge internationally in terms of migrants. Up to 50,000 go to the EU every year to work. Just this past year, 20,000 of those people were then sent back to Pakistan because the EU determined that they had entered the country illegally.
But obviously, right there, that's one of the cardinal rules. If somebody's going to overstay, and it looks like they're going to overstay, don't give them a visa. We gave her a visa.
Jillian, given your work experience in the White House and your expertise, why would the White House walk this line and not call this what everyone else is seeing it to be, which is terror?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a rationale. The only thing I can think, maybe politics, maybe, you know, it's in a nod to the investigation that's ongoing now. You know, maybe the administration is trying to very carefully stay behind the investigation.
I tell you what, here's the president yesterday. He wants it both ways. Listen.
It is possible that this was terrorist related, but we don't know. It's also possible that this was workplace related.
Jillian, I mean, it's embarrassing to watch, but if you were to implicate and say, hey, this really is a terrorist attack, and we're gonna identify where it came from, whether it leads to Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, doesn't that trigger a series of obligations from our government to do something about it? Isn't he, in a sense, holding back whatever response would be necessary to get at a threat like this?
Yes, you know, because we all know it makes zilch difference to the victims of this attack and their families, whether it was terrorism or not terrorism, foreign terrorism, domestic terrorism, whatever.
But there's
legal obligations in terms of the response from the U.S. government. Terrorism versus non has very different implications for what departments and agencies in the federal government get involved in the investigation, whether this is a DOJ matter.
I think that is absolutely true. But to the families, I would say they would not want a state of denial from their government. They would not want the government to use this as a reason to back off any action, which Pete, you just pointed out so well, and Jillian, you just supported. I think these families would want a government to step up and say, this is what it is. This is why you no longer have your mom. This is why you no longer have your brother, your father, your sister. And here's what we're going to do about it. That state of denial, I think, would go right to the heart of the victims' families, in fact.
Well, it does look like politics are involved here because, I mean, we heard so many people from the political left, as soon as it happened, say, this is Exhibit A, why we need more gun laws. And yesterday at the White House, Peter Doocy, correspondent down in Washington, asked Josh Earnest about the president's suggestion that we need more common sense gun laws because they would have stopped it, right? Here's Peter and Josh.
Does the president really think that common sense gun laws would deter terrorists now that he has admitted these two may have been terrorists?
Yes. The president believes that passing common sense gun laws that makes it harder for people with bad intentions to get guns makes the country safer.
But so the president thinks that when there are potentially two terrorists sitting around planning a mass murder, they may call it off because President Obama has put in place common sense gun laws.
Well, Peter, we're still learning of the precise motives of the individuals who carried out this heinous act of violence yesterday. One thing we do know is that the 4 firearms that they were wielding were legally purchased under the laws that are in place now. That's a fact.
That is not a fact because 2 of the ARs were bought by somebody else and then given to him. So that was not legal. That was incorrect.
Jillian, what's your reaction to that?
My off the bat is there's got to be a way to keep guns out of the hands of crazy people, right? It doesn't mean that you infringe on the rest of the rights of the American people. It doesn't mean you take guns away from responsible gun owners. But he showed no
signs of being crazy. I mean, his coworkers thought he was calm, a normal guy, that he was devout but not extreme.
I'm sure as this investigation plays out, we're going to see that that's not the case. The reaction is always, oh, but this person he was great. But as investigations play out, we always see there's red flags, there are certain steps that these people go through as they become radicalized, and we, the government, has to get better at picking up on those signs.
With all due respect, a new gun law is not going to stop a pipe bomb.
No, of course not.
The house was an IED factory. It was a bomb factory.
Well, and
if he didn't use guns, he was going to use pipe bombs.
And you've got a blanket of political correctness on it already with neighbors who were worried about calling the police for fear of looking like they were racially profiling.
That's the kind of thing that needs to
But don't you think by
put the
not
kibosh
calling it Islamic terrorism, by not being willing to call the enemy by its name, you create more environments where citizens can't see something and say something?
I think we create an environment of denial that really undercuts our own national security interest. The terrorists are very clear about defining who we are, who the United States is, who Americans are, and what they despise about our way of life. And as long as we refuse to call them out and put a name on them, put a label on them, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Well, let's put a label on it. New York Post today, this guy's a terrorist, radicalized in contact with jihadi followers. Meanwhile, the Daily News says he's a terrorist, but then they become political on the front page of this newspaper. He said he's a terrorist, but so are these mass murderers and the head of the NRA. You know that there's a big difference between the NRA and terrorism.
I mean, you know, it comes down to, again, the government has got to do a better job of identifying these people before they've committed mass atrocities.
Well, this particular guy was in contact on social media with extremists who the FBI was watching.
Exactly.
So why wasn't this guy on the FBI radar?
How could this be a surprise? I don't understand.
Well, why is it so hard to identify who they are after the fact? That's the problem. Like, identifying them before the fact is a problem. Identifying them after fact is a problem for the White House right now. They've got a bookend of issues right now.
Well, we showed the cover earlier. Here's what you're saying about this headline in the Daily News. Charles emailed us. I challenged the Daily News to show how many mass murders were done by NRA members compared to Muslims and further compared to Democrats. Bet they don't want to answer that.
And another one from Sean, just joined the NRA. Thanks for the push, Daily News. Guess they didn't know they were helping them recruit.
Well, there you go. All right. Jillian, thank you very much for joining us here on the Kirby Couch.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
A lot to talk about.